congratulate Paul on his election to council and thank him for his leadership of the Gilmore Federal Electorate Conference and the work that I know is ahead of us all, but I know that the members of the Liberal Party here in Gilmore are absolutely passionate about their commitment to seeing a federal Liberal candidate elected as the member for Gilmore. None of the work that Andrew has referred to and Jim has referred to that has been delivered here in Gilmore over the past few years would have been possible without Jim Moland's advocacy, leadership and support. As duty senators, we know only too well what our task is across the state of New South Wales, and it's a great pleasure to be standing, as Jim said, in front of one of the most monumental projects in this region, in front of the Nowra Bridge, and looking forward to seeing that come to completion in due course. And working with Andrew in his former role as the State Minister for Transport and his leadership in that role, we know what we have been able to deliver, and we will only be able to do more if the people of Gilmore choose to elect Andrew Constance as their local Liberal member. Jim is absolutely right. Andrew has a record of delivery in his local community, delivery at a state level, and he will deliver here for the people of Gilmore. This is, of course, a constituency, a community that takes a very strong interest in national security issues. In my previous role as Australia's Minister for Defence and in my current role as Australia's Minister for Foreign Affairs, I know that only too well whenever I have the opportunity to visit, to talk not only to our serving women and men who are part of the key communities here in Gilmore, but also to the many retired members of the Australian Defence Forces who have chosen to make Gilmore their home. I know how important these issues are, and if we are to see Andrew Constance elected as the federal Liberal member for Gilmore, I look forward to working with him, with those members of the community who take such a strong and passionate interest in Australia's national security. Can I just say in relation to one of the big challenges in our region right now, and that is the extraordinary events of the last few days that have so profoundly impacted our Pacific family, and particularly in relation to Tonga. The volcanic eruption that has seen such extraordinary movement in water in the region in particular is an enormous challenge for the people of Tonga and the government, a newly elected government of Tonga. We are, of course, in contact through our High Commissioner in Nuku'alofa, but communications are very restricted. We are seeking further information about the extent of the damage outside Nuku'alofa itself, but today we have been able to deploy a Royal Australian Air Force P-8 to undertake surveillance activity over the affected area, working very closely with New Zealand, who I understand have deployed one of their P-3s to work on that surveillance activity themselves. We will be working closely with the Government of Tonga, with Her Royal Highness, the High Commissioner of Tonga in Canberra, to ensure that we are able to deliver the sort of support that we provide to our Pacific family and our Pacific friends. This is a very challenging time. Communications are deeply, deeply affected by the events of the volcanic eruption. It has been felt in other parts of the region. We know ourselves. Here in Australia we have seen the effects on our own coastline, but in Fiji in particular as well. So we'll continue to work through the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, myself and the Minister for International Development and the Pacific, Senator Seselja, to ensure that we are providing all the support that Australia possibly can, working closely with our Pacific partners to ensure that we support the people of Tonga. For Australians who are concerned about Australian relatives in Tonga, can I remind that there are two numbers available to call if you have concerns. 1300 555 135, and from overseas +61 2 6261 3305. Those numbers for consular support if you have concerns about Australian family members in Tonga about whom you may have with whom you may have been not able to make contact, and for family members for whom you may have concerns. Thank you very much.
So we've seen at the last election Gilmore went to Labor. How confident are you that you can swing it back to the Liberals?
To be honest with you, it's not about me or Fiona Phillips. This has got to be a positive experience for our community. They've been through enough. We've got, a community, as I said, it's built on strength and compassion. incredible volunteer rates, an incredible defence and veteran community. And Paul and I both know, working together, that it's not about us, it's about the community. So, there's no point going over history. What's important over the next 4 months is the way in which I prosecute the case to change politics in our region in a way which we bring back the unity. I've seen the best of our community when we're unified. When I was Disability Services Minister, I worked closely with Jenny Macklin to deliver the NDIS. Bipartisanship can go a long way, and I think when people are struggling every day with their businesses, not being able to get staff, we've got seniors who are huddled indoors at the moment through fear of going down to local shops and contracting the virus, through to our health staff who are doing an incredible job 24/7. The last thing people are going to want is, a mouthful of politics. They're not going to get it from me. This has to be an important campaign insofar as it's got to be positive. It's got to be about the bipartisanship we can build across the region to deliver great outcomes. During Black Summer, I saw the community unify in survival and unify in recovery, and unify in a way which I think we've been changed forever, and that's a positive thing. So the next 4 months has got to be based on those sound principles, and that's how I'll practice my craft moving forward in terms of my advocacy and strong representation. I've done it for almost 20 years, serving communities in the Gilmore electorate. Gilmore is a very big seat. It goes all the way from Churros Heads to Kiama, and there's everywhere in between, which, there's a whole raft of different issues. But I want to work through those. I think there's some big issues which the community is crying out for. Obviously, ongoing jobs growth associated with the Princess Highway, Nowra bypass, and I have more to say about that, and the integrated road network in Nowra, the activation of Nowra itself, the activation of Batemans Bay, all of those communities, and of course making sure that we get absolutely, the community understands the guarantee around the level 4 status of the hospital in Moruya. So there's a myriad of issues, but it's not about the politicians at this time. It's about how our community is surviving what is a god-awful period.
You were intending to run for Eden Monaro and then pulled out. What's different this time?
Well, first of all, I live in the seat. And secondly, and I'm very pleased that I was advised on Friday that the coalition agreement's been reached and the National Party will not be contesting Gilmore. So Barra and I buried the hatchet. The thing is that Barra's out of public life now, but certainly in terms of my capacity and my desire to serve, that is what I'm about. I could have walked from politics. I've chosen not to. I want to see an absolute change in the way in which politics works in this country and works at our regional level. And, we've seen too much politics played out, and I firmly believe the community, where the community's at the moment, it is one about survival and getting through the most god-awful of times. And that's where national leadership comes into it. It's where community leadership comes into it. And I'd point out to the community, and particularly everyone at this point in time, the issues that the Prime Minister has had to deal with over the last few years. We haven't seen a Prime Minister since World War II, who on a daily basis is having to deal with crisis after crisis after crisis. And if you look at where we are nationally compared to the rest of the world, there is no better place to live in this world than here in Australia, but particularly in the Gilmore electorate in terms of the pandemic. And it's because of our health staff, and it's because of people like Kerry Chan, and it's because of national leadership from state, Labor and Liberal premiers, and our national leader. So, I think that's really important. And as Maurice touched on, we've got so many important issues at a national level in terms of our security, in terms of supporting our region, and that requires a strength which, I believe is at the heart of the decisions which are being made at this time.
Mr. Gomsons, your last job was as New South Wales Transport Minister. Sydney's public transport system is currently experiencing some serious problems with the ferries that won't fit under bridges, the light rail network shut down, and transport workers striking. How can the people of Gilmore trust your ability to manage their interests when you've left the transport portfolio in such a state?
Thank you for such a great question. I've generated 130,000 jobs, delivered over $100 billion of infrastructure. I have greened up transport with the electric bus transition from diesel, the EV policy. I was the first minister to sign up a renewable energy contract to supply electricity to Sydney trains. We invested over $4 billion in making sure that that rail line is resilient. But I'll tell you one thing which Labor won't tell you. We have seen growth in Sydney's transport at levels which were unmatched in its history. We've seen 300 million passenger trips to 400 million passenger trips on Sydney trains inside 5 years. That's what I've been contending with. I built some of the biggest infrastructure projects in the nation and some of the biggest infrastructure projects in the region, and been behind some of the biggest decisions that New South Wales has ever faced to raise the finance to build that infrastructure. Now, in terms of what's been happening, in terms of those procurements, I think if you study history, you'll find that Transport for New South Wales in those procurements didn't happen under my watch. And at the same time, I'd make the point that we need to continue to deliver Australian jobs in transport, which is what we've done, 130,000. So union games and Labor games, which it goes to the heart of your question, because that's what they're playing at, is not relevant to the people of Gilmore. As I said, people are trying to survive at the moment. They don't need those types of political games out of the Labor Party and the union bosses, and I'm not going to engage on it.
But they're affected by those problems.
Well, mate, there's a duplicated Princess Highway, which Labor neglected for decades. We've gone on and done it. It wouldn't matter if it's Batemans Bay Bridge, the overpass, which is going to be put in place, the Jervis Bay turn-off, the Nowra Bridge, the soon to be very much front and centre Nowra bypass, all of these things. I think, I'm going to keep it positive. If Labor and the unions want to play that, then over to them.
You had some choice words for the Prime Minister during the Black Summer bushfires, which you were personally affected by. Have you moved on with him? What's your relationship like?
Well, first thing, thank you for highlighting. I will be fiercely independent when it comes to my community. I don't care who it is. I will stand up for Gilmore, its people, and if I see something, I'll call it. The Prime Minister and I spoke after what had happened. I've always had a good working relationship with the Prime Minister. I was young Liberal President when he was State Executive, so it's a long-standing relationship. But what I would say is that if you compare him to the opposition leader, and if you look at what's on offer there, for me it's important to be able to work within the construct of government, because I know that's where you can gain access to the funds and work with treasurers and what have you, but I will stick up for my community. If I see something's wrong, I'll call it. I make no apologies to anyone for that. Yeah.
So some of your federal coalition colleagues have expressed strong anti-vax views, including George Christensen. Does that concern you?
Yeah, it does, because our community here in our region is in excess of 95% vaccinated. And I don't care what anybody says, the Omicron variant is not a mild form of the disease. It's killing people, it's hospitalising people. It is of incredible concern to our doctors and nurses who are spending every day on the front line treating unvaccinated people in our health system. And, I'd urge everybody to be vaccinated who isn't, just to help our nurses and doctors out, let alone themselves and their loved ones. So, there's a reason why Australia has the fatality rate that it does compared to the rest of the world. And that is because our vaccination rate is so high. So there is the proof that it works. The government nationally has spent over $300 billion tackling this crisis. Wouldn't matter if it's supporting through JobKeeper, those who have their jobs on hold, through to obviously the people who need to be vaccinated. And from time to time, supply chains in a pandemic get disrupted. So I think it's really important that with the pandemic, look at the leadership, but look at the outcomes. And the other point that I make, it's not over. We have a long way to go. We will see more variants, more than likely, come out of European winter. Omicron popped up pretty much overnight and it spread like wildfire, particularly amongst young people. So we can't treat this as us being at the back end of the pandemic. I'd say to any of my colleagues, future colleagues or past colleagues, that it's really important that we listen to the experts when it comes to vaccination, the people in the know. And that's why it's important that the politicians have the right advice around them. And we've got some of the best advisors in the world. And I think that's really important to acknowledge.
Maurice, a question for you, if I could. In the wake of the federal court's decision, have you spoken to your Serbian counterpart, and are you aware of any diplomatic repercussions that are going to come from that decision?
I think the outcome, which has absolutely clarified the situation, and as we know, Mr. Djokovic has left Australia, has drawn a line under this episode. I spoke with the Prime Minister of Serbia last week during this process, as did Prime Minister Morrison, and I'm absolutely confident that the very positive bilateral relationship between Australia and Serbia will continue on the strong footing that it currently enjoys. I'm also absolutely positive that the vibrant Australian-Serbian diaspora, which plays such an important role in our community, will continue to do that as well. And I look forward to working with my counterparts and with members of the Serbian government, including the Šaže here in Australia at the moment, to ensure that that's the case.
They're pretty angry. They say that we've humiliated ourselves. What do you make of those comments?
Well, I think Australians understand that we operate according to the rule of law, that we have transparent processes, that rules are rules, and there are not convenient exceptions for individuals in this case. These are very important matters of border protection, and they're matters that we take very seriously. Both Minister Andrews and Minister Hawke have worked very hard to ensure that the rules have been applied appropriately. In doing so, the Federal Court has affirmed that position. Mr. Djokovic has left Australia, and we have been very clear with the Serbian government in particular and representatives that these are the rules that apply within our system. They understand that. I think most countries understand the challenges of managing border protection in the context of a global pandemic have not been easy. Not now, not 2021, not 2020. Australia takes this very seriously, and that's why we have been very clear in the way in which we've dealt with this.
Could this whole saga, Minister, this whole saga have been avoided if a visa wasn't issued for Mr. Djokovic in the first place? Will you be reviewing the process by which he was issued a visa?
I'm not going to comment on those details. They're matters for Minister Andrews and Minister Hawke. As I said, the matter has been dealt with. That is the end of that process. As the Prime Minister said, let's all enjoy the Australian Open, and if I may indulge just briefly, let's also congratulate the Australian men's cricket team for winning the Ashes. I'm particularly proud to see that occur with a Penrith Cricket Club member, Pat Cummins, as Australia's men's cricket captain, and we look forward to seeing the women's series starting very soon across multiple forms of the game, and that is so much what Australian summer is all about. Can't wait for them to get started, can't wait to see the Australian Open underway.
Under what circumstances would you see Mr. Djokovic returning to Australia?
I'm not going to speculate on that. The Prime Minister's addressed that this morning.
Thank you, Minister.
And on Tonga, just what's the timeline on returning restoring communications to Tonga for Tongans in Australia who are trying to get in contact with their family?
We expect if it is the case that there is damage to the submarine cable, then that is obviously a significant challenge for repair work. We'll work closely with all our partners to provide whatever assistance we can, including the commercial providers of the submarine cable, and also to look at what other options may be available to assist in short-term communications support. But there is no doubting the challenge that such an extraordinary volcanic eruption presents in terms of its impact, both, as you say, on communications, but also domestically in a country like Tonga. And I hope that we are able to receive from the work of the Royal Australian Air Force and from New Zealand Defence Force analysis that is helpful for the government of Tonga in terms of assessing damage.
Do you intend to send an AUSMAT team? Do we have the capacity for that, given that they have been working domestically on COVID in regional
There is, as far as I'm aware, not a request for an AUSMAT team at this stage, an emergency medical assistance team. Tonga also has extremely strict incoming quarantine requirements related to COVID. It is a COVID-free country as far as I am aware, and that does complicate the movement of people as well. But we would also always consider any requests of that nature. Frankly, our AUSMAT teams have done an extraordinary job through the pandemic in Papua New Guinea, in Fiji, particularly in addressing what have been significant COVID infection increases and also vaccination challenges. I'm very proud of the work that they have done, all of the medical professionals, both representing Australia overseas, but of course, as Andrew particularly has said, the work that our health professionals are doing on the front line every single day in every health facility in this country right now. And if we do need to send an AUSMAT team to Tonga for any reason, then I have no doubt that there would be the same level of positive volunteering that I have seen right through COVID as well.
Do you condemn the comments of your colleague George Christensen in the same way that your possible future colleague Andrew Constance is?
Well, I would always say that the solution to the challenges that we are dealing with in relation to COVID-19 is vaccination. It clearly protects people from serious illness and from death. It ensures that our health system is not dealing with a much greater challenge that we have seen around the world through 2020 and 2021. We have one of the lowest rates of death from COVID-19 in the world. We have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world. That is the strength that Australia has put around itself by choosing to vaccinate. I would encourage everybody who is due for their booster to take the opportunity to have their booster, to take their kids for the vaccinations that are now open to them, because that is what is delivering the protection that we need. My colleagues may have views of their own. They have views with which I respectfully disagree. I absolutely support encouraging all Australians who are eligible to be vaccinated to do so. Those who are not yet vaccinated to be vaccinated, those who are eligible for their booster to take their booster, and those children who are able now to be vaccinated prior to the return to school to do that as well. That is our insurance, that is our safety, and that is a proven outcome here in Australia.
Mr. Christensen's comments and position, scepticism of vaccines undermine your government's supposed strong position?
I think the government's position speaks for itself. It is as strong as it could possibly be. And if you look at our record and the achievements that we have made through the Australian people's strength and leadership themselves in choosing to take up the opportunity to be vaccinated, in choosing to protect themselves and their families, that speaks for itself. Thank you, everyone. And my friends the Flyers are joining us here. Thanks, everyone.
If you want to do a film and walk along so that Ralphie and Camo can get a how I am. It should be